All right, I said two after. We got a good agenda. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody. My name is Joe Brothman. This is the Orange County chapter meeting for the California Society of Healthcare Engineering. You can maybe see if you were here last year, we have a new template. Very excited about that. So we're sharing our screen. Lots of great information today. We're going to go over just a quick introductions. I know that we got a lot of busy people, so a lot of the people that we have on might not be on, but I'll introduce you to them because they're our CSHI leadership. We have a great presentation today from Ecom Energy from Ryan De La Cruz. We're going to get into energy procurement and understanding the complexities behind that. It's a really great topic to understand, especially for our industry. Then we're going to do our, as usual, industry update, our member update, and let you know about some of the cool stuff we have coming up this year. So first, I'm not sure if we do have any of our state leaders on, but we recently had an election and we have a new board. We also had just some movement at the top level. So as you can see, this isn't a GQ ad. This is actually your CSHI state leaders. Really lucky to have such great and talented gentlemen leading our pack, as well as our state office run by Beth and Joyce, who just make everything work behind the scenes. But our industry experts are SMEs, if you will. Anthony Crawford from Kaiser up north, Tom Peterson from our LA chapter. He's our chapter president over there. Santiago, who's one of our members here. He's now our state vice president. And Narasimha is at Kaiser is going to be is our new state president. He was our vice president. Dave Lockhart is our immediate past president, and Dave Baker actually moved to Texas. So he got his own upgrade there. But really great, we're in really great hands up at the state office level. And, you know, if there's ever any questions as to where the state's going or where our chapter fits in with that, these are the gentlemen to reach out to, and we can provide their links, or if you go to the cshi.org page, all of that information's there. And then here, your local chapter leadership, Andrini Lalapua from Costco Fire. She's our chapter secretary. She actually makes everything happen. So if you want to be a member, if you're looking to renew your membership, if you want to be one of our sponsors or one of our speakers or participate in any of your activities, she makes it happen. And then Calvin and myself. Calvin's the only person here with the dark background. I don't know if anyone's following. That's interesting. So I'll call him out for that to see if he can get, you know, in with the crowd and also chop part of his head off like Andrini and I. We're your chapter vice president and president, so we try to represent the chapter at the state level and advocate for our members for all happenings and things like that. We've traditionally had a really strong chapter. We've been really strong with our membership and our affiliates, and we really appreciate the partnership that we have there. So I want to continue that into 2022. It's been now 2 years of Zoom only meetings and just a couple in person. So we're hoping to get on the bandwagon, you know, later on in the year when in-person meetings start up, and later on, I guess, in the second half. And that, I guess, gets into some of the updates that we had for both the state and the chapter. We did have a election, and the new board was voted in at just like a month ago. So they're new in their roles, but really got on the track and just started running. Also, some really exciting news that Beth has really taken on is a new education portal and speaker application. So as mentioned, we have a really strong partnership with our affiliate members, and a lot of times we have people submitting applications or submitting ideas for education opportunities or to be a speaker at a you know, one of these meetings or at one of our conferences. And now there's a whole portal to do that online. Something that I know that would be welcomed from our affiliate partners, because this really streamlines the process. It asks for all the information that's needed up front. It's an online fillable document that you hit submit, and pretty much after that, it's handled. So please take a look at that. Beth, it's live, right?
Correct. If you go to the CSU website underneath the education section, it's a brand new section called Submit a Presentation.
And there's an application on there. So feel free to check that out, know what we're going to ask for, but it's very similar to most other online applications you've done in other organizations. So it's also going to facilitate the addition or the availability of CEUs for both MEC or CHFM credits. Just like today's presentation is going to be made available for CEUs. So if you request from the state office, we can get you that certificate for your continuing education. And that moves into our chapter updates here. We mentioned that we're trying to do some in-person meetings that won't be for special events like we did last year with our golf tournament. Really excited to say that we're already planning for this year's. So we're hoping to do it by June. I don't think there's a more tentative date than that, but we hope to get some really great turnout again. If you were at last year's, it was a ton of fun, really great turnout, and just, it was really nice seeing everybody and doing something in person that was safe, and just everyone had a great time. The other, we want to know what you want to do. We have a goal of trying to do 2 in-person events, whether they're 2 golf tournaments, I don't think that's allowed, or, something else that might be like a picnic or something like that. We do a meeting in the park. Let us know what your thoughts are. We want to gauge kind of what everyone's comfort level is doing in-person events, and if you have safe ways to facilitate those given all these challenging times. We're open ears, so we're trying to come up with fun stuff that's palatable to everybody, but we're totally open for cool, fun stuff if you've seen it done anywhere else. And then register for CSU. So we really appreciate everyone signing in. And if you are a member, thank you very much for your membership. If you need to renew your membership, as mentioned, you can reach out to Andrini. You can reach out to, I think Beth does, you could reach out to Beth, but I think the easiest thing is just go to csu.org and log in. That's where all this education is posted. Everything you're going to see is going to have like live links and everything to download. So just make sure that, when you go in there, you're a member, and it's really easy to renew your membership if you need to do that. If you're not a member, thank you for joining today. We usually ask after your first meeting to, evaluate if you like it. If you like it, really appreciate your membership. It's not too much money, and it makes all this cool stuff happen. So that's it pretty much for the state updates. We're going to jump back into the industry update after I stop sharing. And Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you, sir, for our presentation from Mr. De La Cruz from Ecom Energy.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Let me share. All right. Can you see that, Joe?
You got it. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So like Joe mentioned at the beginning, my name is Ryan De La Cruz, and I'm the Director of Business Development at Ecom Energy. We're a healthcare-focused energy consulting firm, and I'll share more about our team later, but I kind of want to jump right into our topic today. So as Joe mentioned, we'll be chatting about competitive energy procurement, which is not a common topic thrown around CSU, but I think it's a good one, especially with how prevalent energy is in 2022. So kind of agenda for my presentation is I'll start off with a brief overview of exactly what energy procurement is, and then share an update about the current energy market so you have some context for the discussion. Then with the bulk of my time, I'll share best practices and walk your facilities through the energy procurement process. And really my goal is to leave you with some tangible takeaways that you can implement right away. And so we'll wrap up with Q&A at the end afterward. So I'm happy to take your questions there. So let's jump right into it. So what exactly is energy procurement? So energy procurement refers to the competitive procurement of natural gas or electricity in the open market. Now, by default, the local utility provides both the generation and transmission of energy to your facilities, and that's shown there on the left. However, in deregulated states like California, it's possible to unbundle this process so that the generation component is competitively procured. Since the local utility owns the physical infrastructure, they will always handle the transmission and distribution piece, regardless of where your generation comes from. Now, one important note is that all commercial customers in California can procure natural gas, but only some can procure electricity. And so without getting too deep into the weeds, just remember that what we talk about today will apply regardless of whether you're procuring natural gas, electricity, or both. So why do this in the first place? Why procure your energy? There's a lot of reasons, but I want to touch on 4 main advantages this morning. And so the first 2, which are budget certainty and cost control, they go hand in hand. So when you secure an energy contract with a third-party supplier, you have an opportunity to fix a large portion of your energy bill. And that generation component is no longer subject to ongoing rate changes when you do that. So as a result, your facilities can budget with greater confidence. This kind of brings us to the third benefit, which becomes savings. So natural gas and electricity are commodities, just like any other commodities market. And while you can't always guarantee savings, over the long term, a facility that is proactively managing its energy contracts will save more than a facility that's passively accepting standard utility rates. And so the last benefit I'll mention relates to renewable energy. And Joe and I were kind of chatting about this beforehand. This could be its own presentation, but in short, energy procurement presents an easy contractual way to increase sustainability without the need to install on-site assets like solar. So it makes it very achievable for a healthcare system to go out, become carbon neutral without the need to install megawatts upon megawatts of renewable energy. And so hopefully, kind of with those few quick advantages, you can kind of see why it makes sense to pay attention to energy procurement. And before I share best practices, I want to chat a bit about what drives energy prices and what the current market looks like. So I'll start with the national market, kind of looking at the US as a whole. So there are lots of factors that impact energy prices, but certain fundamentals are always going to remain the key drivers. And so, for example, let's look at weather. So in the United States, most electricity generation comes from natural gas-fired power plants. As a result, the 2 commodities are correlated. So when one goes up in price, the other tends to follow. Now, if you remember in February of last year, Texas was hit by that Arctic blast. That incident is an example of what happens during extreme weather. During heat waves, natural gas is in high demand to generate enough electricity for cooling loads, and so costs increase. And in extreme cold, natural gas is needed for heating loads, so that drives up costs as well. And when we have mild summers and mild winters, energy prices tend to subside. The top graph on the screen shows February in each of the last 3 years, with the Arctic blast there shown on the right-hand side. And you can really see how that weather event dramatically impacted electricity prices in 2021. So the next major driver then that we'll talk about is going to be natural gas storage. And so summer is known as the injection season, which is when natural gas gets injected into large underground storage facilities for future use during winter, which is known as the withdrawal season. Now, how much natural gas we have in storage relative to the 5 years prior is a major energy price driver. And so when supplies are adequate, prices tend to come down. And when suppliers fear that there might be a shortage, prices go up. And so that bottom graph there on the slide shows that we're currently kind of within that 5-year historical range for natural gas. And that's thanks largely to the fact that we had the second warmest December on record, not necessarily here in California, but across the US, which helped bring some pricing down across the nation. And the last driver that I want to point out is going to be natural gas production. So just recently, America became the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, which is known as LNG, in the world. And so while our natural gas production is plentiful and it's kind of rebounded since COVID, where there was this major dip, we've now seen increased demand globally for our resources here in America. And so that commodity begins to get a little bit more competitive, and that can affect pricing. So there's plenty of other factors, like I mentioned, who's in the White House, how is the economy doing? All those things combine to make monitoring the market a full-time job. But now that's just at the national level. If we look at California, California is kind of its own beast, as it is with many many industries and many topics. So I'll hit on just a few points that resonate with us here at home. So if we start with hydro generation, our state imports a good deal of hydropower from neighboring states. But due to ongoing drought, hydro generation, which is one of the cheapest forms of power, it was way down in 2021. In fact, we saw certain dams actually had to stop running their turbines because water levels were so low. The next one there on the screen is the Aliso Canyon storage facility. And I'm sure that many of you heard back in 2015, there was that huge methane leak. And so this underground natural gas storage facility, it's one of the largest in the nation, but it's been operating at a limited capacity because there was tremendous regulatory backlash from that leak. And so having less in-state storage, which is one of those market fundamentals I mentioned, means upward pressure is kind of constantly being placed on California's prices. Now we've also got rising renewable portfolio standards, which are known as RPS. And not everyone's aware of this, but California's grid will actually be entirely carbon-free by 2045. And we get to this level in various tiers that kind of step up every so often. And the onus for compliance with those RPS mandates falls on energy suppliers as they produce cleaner energy. And so as they're burdened with the need to produce cleaner and cleaner power, those costs can get passed through to us, the end use customers, on the receiving end. And because we're California and we like to be pretty progressive on some things, our RPS goals relative to other states are very aggressive. And so that's something that hits us at home more so than it hits other states in the nation. And the last one I want to hit on before we keep moving along here is going to be summer capacity constraints. So if you recall 2 years ago now, in 2020, maybe about a year and a half ago, actually, California had its first rolling blackouts in 19 years, unrelated to fires, just genuinely there was a lack of power. So California's summers seem to now bring with them the question of whether there's enough power to even keep the lights on. And so with that question comes increased procurement costs every summer. And so to help kind of visualize how different California's pricing can look relative to the rest of the nation, you'll see that after a tremendous year of price growth for natural gas across the board, so if you begin kind of look around that February 21 mark, prices for natural gas for energy were going up both in California and across the nation. But you can really see at the end of the year there was some good price relief kind of across the board for a lot of states. But in California, we just kept going the opposite direction. We kept climbing. And so, it's just another reason that you really need that expertise, not only to understand energy procurement, but then to deal with it correctly within California. So with all that said, let's get back to energy procurement now and kind of look at a few best practices, which is really what I want to spend the rest of our time doing this morning. And so this will help ensure success regardless of how the market is performing. When you follow best practices, you make the most of the situation. And so I've broken it up into 5 topics, which you can see there on your screen. And so we'll start with risk assessments. And so when it comes to procuring energy, there are numerous ways that you can structure your contracts. So for example, you can stay risk averse and you can fix 100% of your price, or you can stay very risk tolerant and you can let that price fluctuate with the market every month. Now, this would allow you to seize some market dips, some savings, but you also participate in market upticks. Of course, you can kind of meet somewhere in the middle where a portion is fixed and a portion is variable. And so this inevitably begs the question, which product or which procurement strategy is best? And now, short of any market anomalies, like February 2021, the best product is always going to be what's best for your facility. And to understand this, you need to know what your organization's risk tolerance is. And so we at Ecom Energy kind of have a whole risk assessment process that we run our health systems through. But some of the questions that you guys can begin to employ now, you can think about, what is our team's highest priority? Is it price stability or is it cost minimization? And you can ask, what percent of an increase can the energy budget withstand? You can ask, will budget fluctuations affect the level of care provided? I remember a few years ago, we were walking a large healthcare system through this process, asking these questions, navigating this discussion, and the CFO kind of stops us and he says, why are we even having this discussion? Energy is only 3% of our budget. And so that right there tells us, they're very risk tolerant when it comes to energy procurement. They can withstand some price fluctuation with an index-based product. On the other hand, we have facility directors who tell us they cannot be receiving any calls from the CFO asking what happened to energy prices last month. And so the thing to keep in mind is that risk tolerance should be assessed very early on in the energy procurement process. Before the RFP is ever issued, you should know what product you'll ask suppliers to quote. That isn't to say you can only ask for one specific product in an RFP. So you might want to say, hey, show me 100% fixed prices, show me a 50% fixed, 50% variable option. But the point is the same, which is that you want to be methodical in the pricing and the products you're requesting. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get into the RFP process now that we've kind of got our risk tolerance figured out. So, why bother with this in the first place? So your goal as a facility director is to ensure that your organization is getting the best possible energy price and contract terms available. So an RFP, of course, is an efficient way to keep existing suppliers honest and competitive, or to make sure newcomers that are slamming your inbox, that their claims are in line with reality. So how many suppliers should you include in an energy procurement RFP? Now, at Ecom Energy, we typically look to do about 3 to 4, but that figure could be driven by a couple different factors. So, one is how many suppliers serve the region. In California, we have dozens of suppliers that you could include. Is there a minimum number of bids that your facility requires? That's something we run into a lot. How much time do we have before we must be under contract is another question. Do we have 6 weeks, or does your contract expire in 2 weeks and you have to make a decision quickly? That's going to dictate how many suppliers you bring to the table. Once you know which suppliers you're going to include, you'll want to assemble the actual RFP document itself. And the items that you're going to include are going to vary a little bit based on natural gas or electricity, what commodity you're procuring. But for the sake of time, I'll comment on just a few biggies, which I've bolded there. So the first one let's talk about is the bid request. So this might seem obvious, but here are some things that you're going to want to make sure you include. One is tell the supplier, who is the local utility that serves you. For example, we're served by SoCal Edison. When should that supplier plan to begin their service to you? Is it next month, or is it 3 months, 4 months from now? Another piece to include in that bid request is going to be the term of the bids. Are you requesting 12-month pricing, 24-month pricing, 36-month, 18-month? You want to specify what it is you're asking for. And then the type of product. So like I mentioned, is it a 100% fixed price you want to see? Is it a 75% fixed, 25% index? Those are all things to put in that bid request. The next thing that you want to really hone in on is going to be the bid sheet. So this can be as fancy or as simple as you'd like, but the goal is to provide a uniform document that clearly lays out all the cost components for the specific commodity you're requesting. And so by having each supplier use your bid sheet, you're able to line up their bids to get a better apples to apples comparison of their pricing. And this is important because each supplier has their own approach to bundling certain cost components together. And so it's not as black and white as you might think when they submit a bid. There's a bunch of cost components kind of bundled into their price. And the goal is to unravel that. And so the last thing that you're going to want to do is have suppliers indicate, and by using your bid sheet, you can do this, whether or not each cost component can be fixed. It might make sense to actually fix some of those cost components and lock those in as well. If you have a consultant, this would definitely be an area to speak with them about and get their expertise on in this process. The next one I want to hit on is going to be the bid date. So it is critical that all suppliers base their bids on the same market conditions. Otherwise, if your bid sheet is executed perfectly, you spent hours on it, all the cost components are broken out, you will not have apples to apples pricing. You'll be comparing two different things. So we recommend stating something very specific when you provide that bid date. So you want to say something like, bids are due at 8 a.m., January 27th, based on market close, January 26th. And so this accomplishes two things. The first is it ensures that suppliers all quote based on the same exact market conditions, which is key. And the second is it lets you get those bids back early in the morning so that you have time for clarification. So it's going to be inevitably some time you have to go back and forth. And so because suppliers can only hold their prices for a few hours, you also want to make sure your signatory knows when that bid date is so that he or she can make themselves available to execute an agreement the same day. Otherwise, pricing is going to change as soon as that market closes, you're going to have to refresh, and you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So that brings us to contracting, which I know I've got bolded, but I've also kind of made it its own best practice. And so, like I said, we recommend bringing 3 to 4 reputable suppliers to the table. But in order to do that, you've got to get your legal team involved, obviously, because each one's going to have their own contract. And legal, in our experience at least, is never a quick process. I'm sure you would probably attest to that. And so you need to leave them enough time to perform contract review for each of the suppliers that you bring to the table. And so the reason for this is that most every supplier has 2 documents to sign. So the first is known as the master agreement, and that's kind of there on the left of your screen. This is going to be your classic long form contract that contains all the terms and conditions of the agreement. It's enabling, but it's non-binding, which is essential to understand. It's enabling, but non-binding. So why is this? It's because natural gas and electricity are commodities. And when a supplier quotes a price, like I said, that price is only valid for a few hours because that market is constantly changing. And it would be impossible to perform contract review that quickly on bid day. So you need to have things executed ahead of time. And so by separating the terms and conditions in a master agreement, all that's left then to sign is a quick signature on the second contract, which is known as the confirmation. And that confirmation activates the master agreement and locks in that price on bid day. And so this does require some additional review up front. We often get asked, why do we have to review all 4 contracts now? Can't we just review the one from the supplier with who we choose to go with? And really, you can't approach it like that. So energy procurement works a little bit differently. And this is really something we like to point out. The good news, though, is that going forward, it makes switching suppliers easy since you already have those master agreements on file. So let's say you sign 4 master agreements, you only use one of them, you keep them on file. In the future, that legal review process is done. It makes it very easy to switch suppliers going forward. So once those master agreements are in hand, you've got your suppliers, you've got the agreements, you know your timeline. Don't just forward those on to legal. I kind of want to walk you through some things to look for, because your legal team are going to be experts in that specific legalese and those kind of legal components that your organization requires. But they're not energy experts. Chances are they're not energy lawyers. And so they don't know what industry standard language looks like. And so it's up to you or your consultant to recommend industry standard language and terms. And so for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of touch on the bolded points there and kind of walk you through some things to look for. And so the first one we'll talk about is the use tolerance for balancing. And this defines what happens when you use too much or too little energy each month. I'll get into that more later. The next is going to be renewal. So most of these contracts are going to have by default an evergreen clause in them. And so then the question becomes, at what commodity price is your contract going to kind of continue and automatically renew? A third one is going to be performance and adequate assurance. So if you're familiar with this term, when and how can it be called? When is it due? What we try to do is recommend, hey, tie it to our credit rating and trigger it when our credit rating reaches X, and you can define what that would be. Most suppliers, they like to be very ambiguous. They like to maintain the power. We can call this at any time. You want to set the terms and say, hey, you can't call upon this unless a certain set of conditions are met. And so you want to make sure you define what those conditions are. And then the last one is going to be net payment terms. This seems kind of obvious, but in the energy world, standard payment terms for an energy procurement contract are going to be usually net 20, maybe net 25. And we know that doesn't fly for a lot of healthcare systems. And so they won't necessarily tell you this, but if you're willing to pay a small premium that gets built into your energy price, most suppliers will extend those terms for you. So if you need to get to net 30, net 45, net 60, that usually can be done, but you have to bring it up yourself. And as a little bonus tidbit, while we're talking about contract review, what we like to do, what I recommend is, hey, store in an Excel doc, Word doc, whatever you choose, all the contract terms that you negotiated during this RFP, because energy procurement is going to come up again and again every few years. And so because you have to go through this process, probably for the length of your tenure in that position, it helps to have those notes to look back on, kind of jog your memory. You begin to build this template that makes this process faster and faster over time. And so With that, we get into the bid analysis, which I've kind of made our fourth focus for best practices this morning. And so talk a little bit about what the bid analysis is. So by this point, the finish line is in sight. You've probably shortlisted some suppliers, and now that day has arrived to pick the winning supplier and kind of assess the financial implications of their bid. Now, the bid analysis is going to be that document that you refer back to every now and again once that contract is signed to see how your savings estimations are panning out. And so if you're using a consultant, this is definitely an area where they can perform some of that heavy lifting for you. But for the sake of education, I'll assume you're flying solo. And so if this is the case, you'll want to assemble your bid analysis prior to bid day, kind of build out your template so that all you have to do is drop in those prices you get on bid day. And all the formulas and everything is going to populate automatically. Because again, on bid day, timing is critical. You've only got a few hours to move before those prices change. So getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty here, everyone is going to have their own preferences when it comes to the layout and formatting of their bid analysis, but I recommend you start with two things. So start with the annual procured load. This will remind you of how much energy you're actually going to you are procuring, which is usually not all of the energy your facilities use. Typically, it's only worth your time to procure your largest energy accounts. So smaller meters often will not be included, and so you have a different procured load from total load. So note what your annual procured load is, and then number two, be sure to note what your previous contract price is. So we tend to assess the savings against our previous contract price. And keep in mind, remember that energy is a commodity, which means its price moves up and down with the market. It ebbs and flows just like all other markets. So it's not always possible to achieve savings against previous contracts. In any one given particular contracting cycle, the focus might really just be on minimizing cost increases, knowing that savings aren't just going to be feasible this time around. So once you've kind of done those two things, next you're going to want to compare your previous price to your new one by adding the appropriate line items in your bid sheet. So if you recall, we recommended providing that same bid sheet to all suppliers to make sure everything was apples to apples. Any of the non-pass-through items, you can just add those together to determine your new energy price. But for the pass-throughs, what you're going to want to do is ask your consultant or the supplier for some historical costs so that you can begin to build a forecast and understand how those pass-throughs might change over the lifetime of that contract. Also be aware that if you're not fixing 100% of your load, you're going to see what's called an adder, which is really just the markup that the supplier is charging on top of whatever the market price is. So I kind of, I know that was kind of a little bit of nitty gritty there, but the goal really is to address the questions that you see there on the screen. So we want to say, hey, how did this new deal perform compared to our old deal? And as long as you can confidently field these types of questions and you have the supporting resources to justify your answers, you've done your job. So I know this might be hard to see depending on what screen you're looking at, but what we've got on there is kind of a sample bid analysis that we put together for some of our customers. And I can send this, offline. I think it'll be made available for anyone that wants to see it in that C-sheet portal. But a couple final thoughts here while we're talking about the bid analysis. So, if pricing isn't as good as you would have hoped for this contracting cycle, and leadership just isn't understanding why there's no savings, the goal is to use this bid analysis and the market intel you've been getting as you chat with suppliers and your consultant to avoid the market timing trap. So it's true that there's times when you say, hey, I need to revisit this RFP. Now it's not the time to do it. Could be like February of last year during that Arctic blast. But generally, you're going to want to avoid that. You're not in the business of market timing. Your facility directors, and even us as consultants, we're not in the business of market timing either. You're in the business of using sound logic to make good, risk-appropriate business decisions based on knowable information, not future speculation. So we're not trying to, play the market here. We're just trying to make educated decisions. And so with that, you've done your due diligence. It's time to lock in your price, file away that supporting documentation. And really, this gets us into our fifth and final best practice, which is going to be proactive contract management. So with that, I want to kind of start off by addressing the obvious, which is that unless you're an energy manager, I mean, I know there might be some of you on the call. Chances are you're not thinking about your current energy contracts once it's signed. You know, if you sign a 3-year deal and you're a year and a half in, it's probably way in the back of your mind. There's other things that are pressing. So that isn't exactly true though, or it shouldn't be true, because there are some things that you're going to want to keep an eye on. And so I've got them noted there on the screen. The first is going to be that you want to keep an eye on your energy use. So if you fixed a portion of your energy requirements, the supplier has hedged those volumes specifically for your facility for that entire 3-year period or however long it was you hedged. Now that usage might be allowed to fluctuate within a certain range, which is known as a usage tolerance. If you begin to creep outside that tolerance though, there will be cost implications. And so if you know of any unforeseen changes to load, like if you're going to be taking some equipment offline, if you're going to be bringing new equipment online that's going to impact your energy use, you definitely want to let your supplier know about that ahead of time. Otherwise, you could be penalized for over or under using. Now, the second thing that you're going to want to do is look for blend and extend opportunities. So under a blend and extend, or what might be called, a B&E in the industry, is you agree to extend your existing agreement with your current energy supplier in exchange for the supplier blending in a new market low into your existing price. So you benefit from some immediate savings by capturing a market dip, while the supplier benefits from a longer contract. I remember a few years ago, back when the market hit this record low, many of our customers were in existing deals. They weren't due for procurement, but we were still able to capture that market dip through some blend and extends, and facilities that weren't proactively monitoring the market. They weren't looking at their contracts. They missed this opportunity and they missed a market low. So you want to stay on top of that and look for blend and extend opportunities. The third one is going to be, really getting back to my point about starting the RFP process early. So often the new customer will come to us and they say, hey, we need help with energy procurement. And by the way, our contract expires in 3 weeks. And you're just pigeonholing yourself at that point. So it leaves us as the consultant little time to help. It leaves you little time to do anything. And really that can happen for 2 reasons, both of which are understandable. First is, you're a facility director. You're probably too busy doing other things, running your campus, than to worry about a procurement contract that seems to have a few weeks left in it. And the second is going to be, if you do have an energy consultant, that consultant might plan to just renew your contracts with the same supplier. They're not planning to run an RFP for you. So they don't need a lot of time to put you into a new deal. And so really the takeaway here is that the sooner you get started working on that next contract, the more time you have to let some market volatility pass by, the more time you have for legal review, the more time you have to potentially switch suppliers. There's just really benefits to getting started early, and there's no cons other than perhaps the time it might take to do that. So with that, kind of finished with my best practices for the morning. If you are due for procurement in this next year and a half, I do have some things to look out for in 2022, 2023. I'll just run through these really quick. So first is, we're only in January. So if you remember what happened last February, right, this extreme cold, make sure your energy contracts aren't susceptible to winter volatility. On the flip side, keep an eye on those summer contracts. So assuming summer 2022 looks like 2021, 2020, 2019, when that heat arrives, and it's going to, you don't want to be due for a procurement. You don't want to be running a request for pricing in the middle of summer on those hottest months. It's not a good time to do it. So you want to get ahead and plan around that. The last thing I want to point out, if you're due for a procurement soon, is if your facility falls within a community choice aggregation program, you might hear them called CCAs. There's a few unique opportunities and challenges that you're presented with that other facilities won't have. Most recently, the one that affects us here in the Orange County chapter is going to be the Orange County Power Authority. I believe they begin service in April of this year. So it's kind of its own separate topic, but if you do fall within a CCA and you want to chat, I'm kind of happy to help navigate some of the hurdles and opportunities that are available to you. The other considerations, I won't walk through those for the sake of time, but if you do feel you're affected by any of those things, again, happy to chat offline. But with that, thank you all for your time. I just kind of want to conclude by providing a bit more about our firm so you have some confidence in what I shared today. So at Ecom Energy, We've been around for a while. We were founded in the 90s by ECRI, which if some of you are in biomed, you're familiar with ECRI. They're kind of like the consumer reports in healthcare. And so our organization's mission is to bring that same independent, objective approach to all things energy related. And really, we're exclusive to healthcare. So of course, that includes energy procurement, which is what we've been talking about this morning. But it's expanded to quite a bit more. And I don't know if you can see the labels there on that graphic, but we touch everything. So this includes on-site generation, EV charging, energy budgets, rebates, incentives, and so on. So, happy to help in any way that we can. But again, thank you, and happy to jump now into questions. Joe, if you want, I can turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and Ryan, wow, that was a really great presentation. I had started taking notes. You answered most of my questions.
Okay.
So I have a couple more though, but
Sure.
we can open it up. Anyone have any questions? Feel free to come off mute or put them in the chat. I might just kick it off. There's been a ton of construction lately, especially in healthcare, and
Sure.
a lot even in Orange County. The new infrastructure bill that came out last year, it's an opportunity for us for infrastructure projects. And given kind of how those two kind of correlate with, how much my new building is going to need offsets or need to procure energy, what are you seeing in some of these local projects here? Are they planning to do local generation? Are they planning to buy on the grid, or what do you see?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. New construction always gets a little tricky because unless the engineering firm you've been working with can provide some load forecasting, and hopefully the exact amount of equipment that's going to be in there, but oftentimes there's phasing to the building, so only one floor gets opened at a time or whatever it is. It can be tricky to begin procuring and hedging volumes for a facility that you're not exactly sure how much energy you're going to use. So that's one hurdle. Oftentimes, though, with new construction, we do often see it get paired with on-site generation, whether that's fuel cells, solar, cogen, because you can finance that equipment with the new building. So I think to answer your question, it's a mix of on-site generation with a procurement for whatever that remaining load happens to be. But it's definitely the case where, I was just on a call last week where Edison was walking through their new rates. I think they're forecast to increase tentatively about 12% just in 2022 for larger commercial customers. So healthcare facilities are taking notice. They're understanding we need to do something, and so we're seeing a lot of them take matters back into their own hands.
Yeah, and the makeup of your energy portfolio is just so important now.
Exactly.
Both for outward facing, how it looks on optics, but also, as you said, if you look at those curves, those price curves, it's crazy. And you really need to factor that in if you can finance these things. And wanted to bring up that as well. I got a memo yesterday that we need to start looking through the infrastructure bill because there are a ton of opportunities for entities, and a lot of us fall into those entity categories for this infrastructure funding package for infrastructure improvements if they're energy improvements. So all those things kind of mix into a beautiful package. And does your firm help out navigating those waters?
Yeah, definitely. So we can help guide, when a new package like that gets released, how do you get funding? How do you qualify? What applications do you file? We can kind of walk you through all of that.
Yeah, it's its own presentation and terrifying animal. So.
Exactly. Yeah, it is.
Awesome. Any other questions for Ryan? Ryan, thank you so much. As mentioned early on, this is going to be available on the CSHE website along with this whole presentation. And if you have any questions for Ryan, his contact info is up there. And yeah, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the industry update. There we go. All right. Calvin, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to share some resources with you guys. I know everybody's kind of going through this next surge of COVID, and reminder from an emergency preparedness perspective, Asper Tracy is a huge resource of for all of you. There is a library. When this comes out to all of you for the presentation, there are links in these pictures that you just click on, and it'll bring you right to those libraries where you can search anything you may be looking for. ASHI also does something very similar, and they have a COVID-19 resource. And so we wanted to share those resources with all of you. Next slide, Joe. The slide was really about ASHI coming out with what's called Project First Line for clinical staff. The link in this picture will take you to a video, which is really a series of information for clinicians on infection prevention and ventilation. This specific video is on airborne isolation rooms. It's a great way to share with your staff if you need some kind of tools in your tool belt to share with your frontline staff. And finally, the next article comes from ASHI's Health Facilities. This is an article on reliability centered maintenance, also known as RCM, and how healthcare facilities can start looking at new technologies such as thermal imaging to really use to help ensure safe equipment and environments for their patients and visitors and staff. Joe, you want to take the next slide?
I'll take it. The next ones are the really exciting ones. They're mostly Joint Commission updates, so apologies, but we're in January, new year. So lots and lots of new information coming, both in the EC physical environment and the emergency management world, which we all kind of live in. And all of those are wrapped up in the pre-publication requirements here. What the focus on this year's standard revision really is CMS issued a report to Congress regarding the disparity rate for hospital surveys. It decreased 5%. So the disparity rate is the rate at which the state surveying agencies like the Joint Commission or CDPH adhere to the CMS guidelines, and how, if CMS were to come in, what the difference would be from their survey versus a state agency survey. That's going down from when they initially started that report about 10 years ago. So that's good news. But they've also said in that same report, more so than any other finding, the physical environment and infection control conditions are the #1 findings, particularly those inside the life safety code. The top findings were fire smoke barrier, hazardous areas, sprinklers, means of egress, and all the standards that fall under those beautiful topics. So with that said, they're restarting their disparity program. And this is part of Joint Commission's response to that. So you're going to see they've updated their standards to adhere more with the CMS guidance. Also to the right there, the new survey activity guide is out. So a link like Calvin had mentioned is available here, but if you Google Joint Commission Survey Activity Guide 2022, this will pop up. This is kind of like the playbook before the Super Bowl. So if we're able to see how they're going to be doing their survey, it prepares us really nicely for when they come in. And I know they like it because it makes their job easy. The next are just several edits to the EC chapters. So as mentioned, these might coincide with some of the CMS regs, but some were deleted because, like, for instance, EPC 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8, most organizations don't have water storage tanks anymore, so they're getting rid of those. They also added an emphasis on reporting of incidents that adversely affect patient care with a biomedical piece of equipment. And then also with the emergency management standards, they've been completely rewritten. So they've deleted pretty much everything. EMs 0101 through 040101 have been deleted and replaced with chapters EM 090101 through EM 17010101. So if you're like me and you're counting, that's a lot more standards that they've added and are replaced and added in their replacement. It's exciting stuff. These are all available. I don't have much I could detail right now because frankly, I'm still reading about them. Calvin, anything you know about them that you would want to add?
On the EM standards, I think one of the biggest things outside of just renumbering everything is now your EOP is to be reviewed every 2 years rather than annually. which gives us a little bit of reprieve, I guess you can say. But now you have to go through your EOPs, and if you reference all your EPs, you got to change all those as well. So there are some other EC standards that I saw yesterday, which I can send out to the group as well, that I got a notification on, but I don't have them in front of me right now.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing, and this link will take you there, are the pre-publication standards section in the Joint Commission. They update that monthly, as you all know. So next, Andrini, I'm going to turn it over to you for a member update and information on upcoming events.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Just a quick note on the EP7. I know that it's being deleted by the Joint Commission, but as your fire life safety contractor vendor, it is still a NFPA 25 requirement to do an annual fire tank inspection and a 5-year. So don't tell me not to test it yet. I mean, if we're not the enforcer, we're just the informer, but if you still have a tank, like I know there's, chalk people here, so you still have to test it, unfortunately. So, but unless you don't want to, I think, whatever you want. Okay, so new member, if there any new member here, and then at some point this year, I promise to give all the new members your PIN at some point this year, maybe on the annual institute in June, if we never gonna have a in-person meeting. But yeah, so just come up to me and then I will give you your PIN. And if anybody has an input or like job posting, code update, or best practices, or Joint Commission survey for this year or the past year, please let me know, and then we can put you up for the next meeting, and then so you can share all your good stuff. And then we actually have door prizes for today's meeting. It's from Brian Campaign, sorry if I butcher your name, from Forensics Analytical, and it's a Starbucks gift card and an e-gift card. And then the random winner is Megan Pierce from Chalk. And then, so I have put my email. If you don't have Megan's email, I can email you her email, Brian, and then, well, I will ask her first, but you can also chat her here to get her email address so you can get it. So if the other affiliate members wants to do like an e-gift card, like that's what we're doing right now because we're doing Zoom. So just so you know, but we are moving to in-person at some point this year, right, Joe? If everything's good. I know right now with the Omicron, everybody is busy, but our next meeting is on February 17th with Lean FM Tech. I believe that's how they call their name. And then right now it's through Zoom, but if everything goes good, we may be able to do an in-person meeting. So just check out the invitation from Beth and then from the state, and then we'll move forward. So our upcoming event is going to be the annual institute on June 1st to the 3rd at Lake Tahoe. So if you don't have, just put it on your calendar now. I'm sure the invitation will come out soon. And cross your finger, before that, we want to have a golf tournament. So just gather your team now, and we should have it before then, but I know in an annual institute, we probably also going to have a golf tournament there. So that's it from me, and everybody stay healthy. I think that's it. Oh, for upcoming meeting education trainings, if you have any topics from facilities that you want me to find a vendor, please reach out to me. I put my email on the chat, and we already have someone for April, but we're still looking for March and May onward. So if you have any presentation, please reach out to us. And then again, if you're new and this is your first time, please don't be scared. And I was scared, 7 years ago, and everybody's so helpful. And now we all become best friends and family. I'm looking at Tom and Alan. They're all smiling at me because I learn a lot from them. So thank you. And this has been a great, organization, and we learn a lot and we have fun a lot. Not lately, but we try to have fun every time we meet, right, guys? So thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Oh, nice, Andrini. That was great. Appreciate it. And just want to touch on, if you have, and I know a lot of people came in a little bit later. Apologies. We usually start at 7:30, but this one started at 7. I'll take the hit for that one. I don't know how that happened. We're all kind of going like this. But in any case, we are planning to have, a tournament, I'm sorry, a golf tournament the first half of the year, or at least, before Q3, I'll put it that way. A lot of work going on there. So thanks everybody for who's doing that. We're looking to maybe do something else too. So looking for ideas throughout like picnics or a park meeting or something like that. Just to make it a little bit more fun. It's been like 2 years of this, and appreciate everyone riding the roller coaster with us. And appreciate everything everyone's doing. It's been like a crazy 2022. Who would have thought, we're kind of back in the saddle again. I know if you're anything like me at a hospital, it's just been like 2020 all over again. It's a nightmare. So I really appreciate everything everyone's doing to keep everybody safe. All of our partners supporting us. I know a lot of people on this phone haven't heard from me or a lot of people in a while, but you've been coming out and helping out our hospitals and our health systems get through this whole thing. And hopefully, with all of our help, we can get through it. So thank you. As Andrini mentioned, February 17th is our next meeting with Lean FM Technologies. And I'll turn it out in case anyone wants to say anything before we end today's meeting. I see Travis came on with a golf course behind him. That's good timing, buddy. But thanks, everybody. We will touch base again in February. Hope everyone stays safe and happy January, whatever. Have a good one.
Thank you.